Do bigger muscles make you less athletic? We're gonna dive deep into hypertrophy for athletes, and we're gonna start right now. You always hear coaches saying, I don't want you to get too big. When you get too big and bulky, you're gonna be slower. You're not gonna be a better athlete. You're gonna be too muscular. First, what type of muscular hypertrophy are there to be achieved in the world of sports performance? So first we have to understand what makes muscle bigger. If we look at myofibrillar hypertrophy, that can lead to a larger gain of muscle mass. That means you're hypertrophic. And when you have myofibrillar hypertrophy, you have more myofibrils, which leads to greater force production. So if we're doing heavy lifting, let's say we're doing snatches or power cleans, and we're doing 7 doubles, and we do that regularly over 3, 4, 5, 6 months, you will gain muscular mass, but you're producing more force. If you're producing more force, you're gonna be able to produce more force on the field with greater mass, which means you're probably gonna run faster. So we are also gonna gain myofibrillar hypertrophy by doing things either rapidly like plyometric work, or even doing absolute strength, like doing 7 triples of back squat. That will lead to more muscle mass and also greater force production. That takes us into sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. If we're focusing on sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, we're gonna have this aqueous fluid that comes into the muscular cell and helps the cell expand. Let's say I'm doing 5 sets of 17. I wanna get a huge pump in my shoulders. I'm doing dumbbell military press. That is going to lead to sarcoplasmic hypertrophy because of the aqueous liquid going inside of my muscle cell. So that sarcoplasm is gonna start to expand the muscle cell and help me get bigger. And then finally, about 20% of our hypertrophy is gonna be based off of connective tissue. If my joint structure gets thicker ligaments, gets thicker tendons, now we can store more energy, and that in turn is gonna help us produce more force. So if we're gaining hypertrophy through more myofibrils, and we're actually training also in sarcoplasmic hypertrophy rep ranges, and our tendons are then gaining size, we can produce more force and handle more force. So how can we achieve hypertrophic gains? What types of exercises will lead to muscular hypertrophy? We can achieve more hypertrophy through mechanical tension. So if we're doing something like bicep curls, Zottman curls here for sets of 17, this mechanical tension will force some hypertrophic gains in my muscles and in my tendons. And on top of that, if I'm doing sport-specific work, so let's say I'm a wrestler and I'm on the mat and I'm engaged with other combat athletes, I'm wrestling someone else for over 30 minutes. I'm going to achieve some sense of sport-specific hypertrophy. My grip strength might go up. My neck might get bigger. Have you ever looked at a wrestler's neck and their shoulders? They look like they don't have necks because they're achieving sport-specific hypertrophy. We can also do exercises that lead to some sense of muscular damage. So the old standard would be when our muscle gets damaged, that's when our muscle grows. And that's sort of like an anti-PC term here, an old wives' tale, okay? No one actually could explain that. But now, what we're starting to learn is that there is some truth to that. If we do some sense of exercises where we have a slower eccentric, and I'm pretty sure I have a hole in my right armpit. As we're doing that slower eccentric here, that's gonna cause a little bit more muscular damage in our triceps. And in turn, now our body's gonna mobilize satellite cells, okay? So we're gonna be mobilizing our satellite cells, which will then be proliferated and go to the construction site. They're gonna go to the area where there's muscular damage. And when they get to the area where there's more muscular damage, they're gonna repair that muscle and lead to greater hypertrophy. Oh, and that in turn is how satellite cells help us grow. We can even get hypertrophic gains from metabolic stress. Think about BFR. BFR is a great tool that you can use if you're injured, you wanna go a little bit lighter, and it creates a higher degree of metabolic stress. That metabolic stress can maintain or even increase strength without really having a tremendous load. Ah, my quads, my quads. What sports might we see that individuals are more hypertrophic? You can achieve hypertrophy by using our POWERLASTICs available at garagestrength.com. So gymnasts are gonna be athletes that are extremely hypertrophic. Think about their glutes, their quads. Look at their backs and their biceps. They're doing things on a regular basis outside of traditional resistance-based training that lead to hypertrophic gains. Wrestlers are another group of athletes that are gonna have absurd hypertrophy in their neck, in their traps, in their forearms because of what they're doing on a regular basis inside of training. Football players will achieve hypertrophy in their legs, their shoulders, even inside of their back because they're holding more load. They're actually wearing shoulder pads. They're actually making contact. They're grappling inside of training. So that leads to more resistance, and that mechanical load in turn forces your body to adapt and get a little bit bigger. Shot putters and discus throwers. This is a great area where you're gonna see some really, really unique hypertrophy. So one of the things that I remember Charles Poliquin talking about is that it is very challenging to achieve hypertrophy in your abs. Now, if you look at shot putters and discus throwers, they rotate so much that they actually achieve some muscular hypertrophy in their love handles because they're rotating so frequently in their training. This takes us into CrossFitters. CrossFitters do a lot of gymnastic movements, they do a lot of weightlifting movements, powerlifting movements. They are hypertrophic freaks. They're absolute animals when it comes down to muscular hypertrophy. Look at weightlifters, the same thing. Check out a weightlifter when they walk past you. Look at their hamstrings, their quads, their glutes. They're enormous, they're traps. They're gonna be bigger, they're more muscular defined because of the training that they're doing, and they still produce a ton of force. And then finally, that takes us into sprinters. If you walk past sprinters at the World Championships, you're gonna see that every sprinter has massive hamstrings and a massive butt. Very few world-class sprinters don't have big hamstrings and don't have a big butt. I would say Elaine Thompson-Herah is one of the few longer-limbed sprinters that doesn't have a very large glute area relative to other individuals in her sprint. But typically, she does have massive hamstrings. So you'll see that hypertrophic gains, even at that world-class level, occurs differently based off of genetics, but also based off of what their tasks are in their given sport. So a very simple comparison that we can make here is based off of genetics, based off of gender type. If we look at people who produce more force, men produce more force than women. That's why men swim faster. That's why men run faster. The reason being is because men have more muscle mass than women. So this disproves right away these coaches that are saying muscle makes you big, bulky, and slow. If we can look at it like, if we get women to gain more muscle mass, they'll produce more force and they'll be more explosive, they'll be more coordinated, and it's the exact same concept with men. One of the keys is to identify what type of lifts you really benefit from as an athlete and what type of lifts gain a certain amount of muscle mass. And then you can identify that as an individual or as a coach and work towards improving that system so that your muscles are firing and performing on all cylinders. Comment down below with what lifts help you be a better athlete. So what does this mean for hypertrophy? Targeting one aspect of adaptation is easy, but it's also ignorant. Look at the entire global system of training to optimize performance. Sports performance is technical. If we want to be great, we have to constantly train the technical aspect of whatever sport that you're actually playing. Think of the human body as an organism. Look at football running backs for an example. They will have hypertrophic gains just from being on the field, just from doing their sprints, just from playing with pads on and making contact and making hits. But they will also have hypertrophic gains from work that they're doing in the weight room. And if they build bigger muscles and they also focus on the rate of force production, they're focusing on how well those muscles fire, they will increase their impulse. That means that they will produce more force in a short period of time. So now we have a muscle that's larger, a larger contractile structure that innervates quicker. So they'll be able to fire this larger muscle at a higher speed with a better nervous system, a smarter nervous system. This larger muscle that's achieved from hypertrophy and then trained effectively with proper innervation techniques will produce more force and ideally down the road lead to greater sports performance. So then it comes down to the coach who has to plan. They have to look at, all right, how is the hypertrophic gains? How is this actually being elicited? How is this happening? Is it from metabolic stress? Is it from some sense of muscular damage? And then how can we train this new hypertrophic gain through plyometrics or through technical coordination movements where they're gonna be forced to fire at a higher speed? Hypertrophy leads to better performances as long as rate of coordination is trained properly and effectively over long periods of time. So if you want those hypertrophic gains for your brain, make sure you listen to our podcast, Masters of Sport. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become champions, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.